All right, so today we are starting topic 8, which is solving equations. So last topic, we were simplifying the expressions, but we didn't have an equal sign. So we couldn't ever figure out what our variable was equal to, or our letter was equal to. So today, we are going to actually start solving and figuring out what those letters actually mean in those equations. Before you get started, I want you to come over here and write the learning goal. The learning goal today is I can solve simple equations using inverses. So I want you to write this in your Cornell notes. And I also want you to know that at any time you can pause this video and that way you can catch up on the writing and then we get everything written down. I know that sometimes I go pretty fast. So just hit pause and then get it written down. And then as soon as you are done writing it, go ahead and press play again. And you can do that anytime throughout this video. Just make sure that you don't fast forward because you will miss questions that will be counted for your participation and will be graded for today. Your notes are also a grade. These are a note check. There is a note check that will be happening on Monday. So again, the learning goal, I can solve simple equations using inverses. You'll notice underneath your learning goal on your Cornell notes, there's a question that says, what does the variable represent? And the variable represents a number that balances the equation. And today you're going to really understand what that means once we dive into the examples. Sometimes it's hard to understand it when we're just trying to use our words. But that variable or that letter is a placeholder for a number that makes that equation true. And so you'll see that today. Your next question is, how do you solve for a missing variable? And you solve for a missing variable by using the inverse property. And the inverse property is a part of our order of operations. So our order of operations pyramid goes like this. We have addition and subtraction. And the inverse of addition is subtraction. So that means that the inverse actually just means the opposite. The opposite of multiplication is division. We aren't going to see any of these this unit, but this is a square root sign, and the opposite of a square root is an exponent. So just make sure that you have that in your pyramid. We'll get to that in a little bit, another day. And then at the top of our pyramid is always our parentheses because we cannot do anything until we simplify what's inside those parentheses first. All right, so let's get started. So our first example is 3 plus x equals 11. And so you'll notice we have this balance beam. And we are trying to balance this equation. So we're trying to see, well, what plus 3 will give me 11? Now, sometimes you can do it in your head, but I want you to get used to showing your work because if you don't show your work, it'll be harder when we start getting into multi-step equations. So first thing we do, always, is draw a line down the equal sign. The reason we draw a line down the equal sign is because we are trying to balance it. So whatever I do on this side of my equation, I have to also do on this side of the equation. This line is equivalent or equal to the middle part of our balance. So right now, we drew our line, and now we have to see, well, what is happening to x? Right now, we are adding 3 to x. So what's the opposite of adding? We know that the opposite of adding is subtracting. And so we are going to subtract 3 from both sides. Three minus 3 gives us 0. And then we bring down what we didn't use. 11 minus 3 gives us 8. Whenever we have a 0, we actually don't even have to write that part because they canceled each other out. So you'll see me throughout the video just put a line through it, and that's because the 2 cancel. And that's what we're trying to do. That's why we use the inverse property. So now we know that x equals 8. So we know that in order to make this equation balanced, we have to do 3 plus 8, and that gives us 11. So here are the steps for solving. First step, we draw a line down the equal sign. That's what we did up here. Step 2, identify what is happening to our variable. That's when we looked at it and we said that we're adding 3 to our variable. Step 3, we're going to do the opposite, or the inverse. Step 4, whatever you do on one side, you must do to the other. So if you need to pause that to write that down, do so. All right, so in this equation, we have b minus 2 equals negative 10. Step 1, we need to draw the line down the equals. Step 2, identify what is happening to our variable. Right now, we're subtracting 2. So that means I need to do the opposite, which means I'm going to add 2 to both sides. These cancel out because they're inverses. I bring down what I didn't use, which is my variable. And negative 10 plus 2 gives me negative 8. So b equals negative 8. All right, next one. We are going to look at what's happening to our variable after drawing the line down the equals. Right now, we know that fractions actually mean division. So knowing that fractions mean division, that means that my variable is being divided by negative 5. So I need to do the opposite. So the opposite of dividing is multiplying. So I'm going to do that on both sides of my equation. Negative 5 times my variable is negative 5d all over negative 5. And that equals 7.2 times 5. And you have to hit this negative down at the bottom. And we see that it is negative 36. So negative 36 is on this side. However, a negative divided by a negative gives us a positive, so that cancels. 5 divided by 5 just gives us a 1, so those cancel. And all that I'm left with now is my variable. So now I can bring that down, and I know that my variable equals negative 36. On this example, we are multiplying. And multiplying is whenever we see a number and a letter stuck together. So we're needing to draw a line down the equals. Right now I'm multiplying by negative 2, so I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to divide by negative 2. Negative 2 divided by negative 2 gives us a 1, so those cancel out. I'm left with my variable. So I have my variable equals 1 over negative 2. And this is okay to keep it as your answer. So how do I know if I'm doing this right? There's always a way to check your work. So let's check it. We said that our variable was equal to negative 36. So what we're going to do is we're going to plug in negative 36 into our variable. So now I have negative 36 divided by negative 5, and that should equal 7.2. So whenever I use my calculator, I have 36. I make it negative. By 5. Need to make it negative. And I do, in fact, get 7.2. So, there we go. So, our answer is correct. What is happening? So, you can check it over here as well. And so, I know that negative 2 times, I'm going to plug in 1 over negative 2 for my p, and that should equal 1. So we know that every whole number can actually go over 1. We're going to multiply straight across. Negative 2 times 1 gives us negative 2. 1 times negative 2 gives us negative 2. Negative divided by a negative gives us a positive. And 2 divided by 2 gives us a 1. So that does, in fact, work. I want you guys to do this one on your own. And then we will check it on Monday. And then we are going to scroll down to which equations have the same solution. So we actually have to solve all of these in order to figure out if they have the same solution, because a solution is an answer, and that means we need to solve for A. So first we have 2.5 A equals 30. I'm going to draw my line. Right now I'm multiplying by 2.5, so I'm going to divide by 2.5 because dividing is the opposite. And we always divide by whatever is happening to A. 2.5 divided by 2.5, those cancel. I bring down my A. And 30 divided by 2.5 gives us 12. So A should equal 12. So we need to see, does A equal 12 over here and over here? So right now, I have 4 over 3A equals 16. I need to draw my line. With fractions, it can be a little tricky, but know that you need to multiply by the reciprocal. So that means we're going to multiply by the opposite, or the flipped fraction. So 3 over 4. These cancel each other out because 3 times 4 gives us 12, and 4 times 3 gives us 12. And 12 over 12 gives us a 1. 1 times A just gives us an A. So I'm just bringing down that A. Whatever I do on this side, I have to do on this side. So I'm going to multiply by 3 over 4. And I'm going to put this over 1 so it makes it a little easier because I'm multiplying straight across. So 16 times 3 is 48 over 4. 48 divided by 4 gives me 12. So this one is equivalent because A equals 12 and A equals 12 over here. So now we're going to do the same thing. We're going to draw a line down the equals. And I want you guys to solve this one and tell me if this one is equivalent or not. So now that we have our notes, make sure that you've copied everything down and answered all the questions throughout the Edpuzzle. And then we will do a note check on Monday, as well as our summary. So that can actually wait. From now on, through the rest of the class is homework time. And so this time needs to be spent doing homework. That is what is expected of you. And so now, hopefully, you'll have enough time to work on that in class and you won't have as much for homework. You do need to show in work form, and you need to show that for all problems.